Coming up on Tech News Weekly, Dan Moren joins me to talk about, well, rumors of an A18 Pro MacBook and the iPhone 17 Air. Afterward, we talk about Samsung Galaxy Unpacked. Yes, Samsung has held its event, and there's a lot the company announced, before Joe Supan of CNET stops by to talk about how AI is heading into the internet to grab obituaries and make money off of them. Before we round things out with the AI browser wars, OpenAI and Perplexity both working on an AI browser. Stay tuned for this episode of Tech News Weekly.
Podcasts you love
from people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Tech News Weekly, episode 395, with Dan Moren and me, Mikah Sargent. Recorded Thursday, July 10th, 2025. Galaxy Unpacked, Folds, and Flips. Hello and welcome to Tech News Weekly, the show where every week we talk to and about the people making and breaking that tech news. I am your host, Mikah Sargent, and I am joined this week by special guest host, Dan Moren. Welcome to the show, Dan.
It's always a pleasure to be here, Mikah. Thank you for having me on what is always, I assume, a special week if I'm here.
It is indeed a special week if you are here, because it is a week that is unlike a typical week, and therefore it is special. Ooh. For people who are tuning in for the first time, or for those of you who have forgotten since last week when we did the show, this is the time in the show where we share our stories of the week, things we've been reading about that we think are interesting, that we want to share with all of you. And it starts off with you, Dan. Tell us, what is your topic?
With me, well, let's talk rumors, because I'm here and it's Apple rumor time. An interesting rumor that's been floating around the last week or two is the possibility that Apple will release a MacBook powered by the A18 Pro chip. Now, you're probably sitting there thinking, what's the big deal? But you also may be thinking, doesn't Apple power its Macs with M-series chips? And you would be correct. The A18 Pro is an iPhone chip. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, nobody saw that coming. So why might Apple decide that it wants to put an iPhone chip in a laptop? Well, there's a few possible reasons. One of which is, guess what? It's all about cost. And not just cost to folks like you and me who might want to buy said laptop, but cost to Apple for producing that laptop. Yes, let's be clear. That's the most important thing every time. How much will this cost Apple? The A18 Pro is the chip that is in the iPhone 16 Pro currently. And that is obviously one that they produce quite a few of, right? I mean, these iPhone chips get produced in huge scale, and they are produced to be power efficient. They're produced to be cost efficient to a certain degree, and they have a lot of other benefits going for them. They're generally pretty good chips. I mean, anybody using an iPhone 16 Pro, which is the cutting edge, for Apple iPhones at this point, they're no slouch, obviously. But they still could be a little cheaper to produce than even the M1 chips that power the oldest Apple Silicon Macs. And because Apple has started to move away from those M1 chips, right? I mean, those chips are 5 years old, right? The current generation is the M4, with the M5 expected to be on the way. And it's possible that Apple might want to phase out those M1 chips. You can still find those M1 MacBook Airs actually available at retailers like Walmart. Apple has been producing the older M1 MacBook Air at a lower cost, which is kind of interesting. And cost is not something that Apple tends to compete on, right? The base level MacBook Air, which is the cheapest Mac, new quote unquote Mac, starts at about $1,000. And they've been pretty consistent about hitting that $999 price point. But, the challenges are the competition. There's a lot of Chromebooks out there that obviously go for a lot cheaper. There's a lot of PC laptops that go for a lot cheaper, and Apple's always been pretty content to seed that market. But the idea of releasing a computer powered by this A18 Pro iPhone chip might make it possible for them to target that sub $1,000 demographic. And obviously, there are a lot of people who might be interested in such a thing. And there are a lot of markets where cost is the most important thing. I mean, I think particularly of education is a great example where cost really drives decision making. And an A18 Pro powered MacBook might be something that's more compelling to large institutions, including education institutions. And there's a lot of people who just want the cheapest, MacBook they can buy. And right now that's been, again, $1,000, obviously a little bit less if you can find it on sale or if you're willing to go with that M1 Air. The 18 Pro also in some cases would be as good as, if not better than the M1, which is, again, 5 years old. So there might be some trade-offs to such a machine. It would likely support USB-C, but not Thunderbolt. There might be some other limitations in graphics performance or what have you. But generally, it seems like it would be a pretty powerful device. Now, we talked about scale a little bit before, too, and I think that's an important part of this equation. Apple doesn't make nearly as many Macs as it does iPhones, right? They sell millions upon millions of iPhones every single year. And so if you're producing something with a iPhone chip, you're producing that in very large quantities, and therefore you have some cost benefits, right? Because the more you produce, the cheaper it often is per unit. So being able to move those chips into other devices, such as a MacBook, might produce some cost savings, especially if they want to, ramp down the line producing that older M1. And it could have some benefits in terms of power efficiency. Obviously, it's designed to be in a phone, right? So these things tend to be much more efficient. Not that the current Apple Silicon level ones aren't already pretty efficient, but, adding in something that's designed to be in a phone might be even better. Might make them lighter. You might be able to trade off for a little less battery capacity for efficiency. There's a lot of possibilities there with something like an A18 Pro powered MacBook. Obviously, we don't know a lot about this product because this is all rumor, and whether it would even be able to hit set a price point or whether Apple would still, of course, want to make a hefty profit on it. That will remain to be seen.
Yeah. Is there any precedent for Apple putting out a product that is lower powered and how the company goes about communicating it in such a way that it's not going, well, this is not as good as the other stuff that we have, but here is how it still is awesome. And does that make sense? Like,
sure.
How do we foresee Apple kind of selling this thing?
It's not something they've done on the Mac recently. I think the best example to look at is something like the recent iPhone 16e and before it, the SE line of iPhones. Those are phones that are explicitly designed to come in underneath the sort of base level cost of the quote unquote new products that exist in those categories. So, if the iPhone 16 comes out, it'll have a price point at like $800. So you can get an iPhone 16e, obviously, for a bit cheaper. It comes with some trade-offs, right? It's not as powerful. It has an older chip in it. It doesn't necessarily have all the bells and whistles, right, that a brand new top-of-the-line iPhone might have. And so that's something where they can kind of communicate, look, this is something we're aiming at that's more potentially aimed at people for whom the buying decision is not about how do I get the most power? How do I get the newest thing? How do I get the best thing? It's about how do I get the most affordable thing? And that's an important metric still. And it's not one that they've really taken with the MacBook or the Mac line at all. I mean, the closest you have there is like the Mac Mini, which is also designed as a more affordable computer. But even that comes with trade-offs, right? You got to buy a display or have a display. You got to buy your peripherals. So Apple has not really played that game a lot of times of like, hey, how can we make this a cheap product, right? Like there was that craze in the 2000s for netbooks, real cheap, small laptops. And Apple never really played in that, right? It made the MacBook Air, which was a very small, powerful laptop, but it wasn't cheap. And so I think it's interesting to see how Apple is going to potentially spin that. As you said, how do we tell the people this is still a great Mac, right? It's still the best Mac that amount of money can buy. And I think, looking at both the iPhone 16e and the Apple Watch SE, which is also sort of occupies a similar place, you can see kind of where they might make some trade-offs. I think the base level iPad is a great example of that too, right? The $350 iPad which is still a very, very competitive
Right.
device, but it's a lot cheaper than going into, say, an iPad Air, which I think is over $500 now. So, they do occasionally dip their toe there. It just hasn't traditionally been something they've done for the Mac. And I think they're realizing that potentially there's still a lot of upside for them to address an audience that they don't appeal to right now, or at least are appealing to in this very small subset by doing things like having that M1 Air available through Walmart.
Now, that is kind of one of the thin, svelte options. We're trying to figure out a way to
segue into other
segue.
thin, svelte options.
It's very easy to wedge it in because it's so thin.
I see what you're doing.
So we've got, yes, the potential for a MacBook, and as always is the case with this tech stuff, we'll have to wait and see if it comes. But there's another rumor of another device that I hope you could tell us a little bit about, and kind of where you, like, how believable do you think this is?
This is the rumor that there is a thinner iPhone coming with the iPhone 17 line this year. It has been sort of tentatively called the iPhone Air because that's a word that Apple really likes throwing on its products. And the sort of driving factor here is it seems to be a thinner iPhone than they've offered before. Now, where does this fit in the iPhone 17 lineup? Well, in the past, Apple's experimented with trying different form factors for some of its other devices, right? They're pretty set on the base level iPhone 17, your iPhone, whatever number year it is. There's usually a Pro version that is the same size. And then the Pro version also has a Max version, which is the same as the Pro, but larger. Fine. In the past, we've had both the iPhone Plus then, like the 16 Plus this past year, which is the same as sort of that base level iPhone 16, but larger. And if you go back a few years, we also had the iPhone Mini, which was the same as the base level, but smaller. Neither of those seem to be huge sellers for Apple. They've tried that a lot, but playing around with the different screen sizes hasn't driven, I think, as many sales as they hoped. So this year, we're going to change a different dimension. Instead of making it bigger or smaller, we're going to make it thinner, with the hopes that people like thin, light phones. This will not necessarily be smaller. It will probably be, I think they said it's a little smaller than the Plus model that we have this year, somewhere around 6.5 to 6.6 inches, which is bigger than the iPhone 17, 16, if you're sort of assume those will continue in the same size, but not as big as the larger one. Boy, you think this is going to simplify things, and instead it's just more confusing. The other part that makes this a little confusing is that there's some theory that it may be more expensive than some of these base models. And because it's thinner, it may have some trade-offs in terms of what things it can have in it, right? Like camera thickness, it often makes a difference in terms of how many camera lenses you have or what kind of camera lenses you can have. Obviously, it makes a difference in terms of battery life, in terms of how much battery you can fit in there. So it's unclear exactly what that's going to look like here and whether they're going to position it as kind of a fancier version of the iPhone that will compete more with the Pro, or whether it's just like, hey, you can get the base level iPhone, but you can get it thinner. So we don't know. It is sort of speculated to be the thinnest iPhone that Apple has made for many years. Some people say it's thinner maybe even than the iPhone 6, which is more than 10 years old. Obviously, phones have changed a lot since then. You're scratching your head because you don't think the iPhone 6 is 10 years old?
That just feels like a long time ago, but
it was
also
a long time ago, Micah.
It's an odd comparison, I guess, for me. It's like,
I think it's because it's the thinnest iPhone that they had prior to sort of the modern era. They've been getting thicker and thicker over the years as they've built up things like battery life to support all those additional features they've added, right? Bigger screens, more vibrant screens, more cameras, higher speed processors. All of that stuff means generally more thickness. But this is something where they're trying to really, I think, kind of see how small can they get it. And, going back to something like the iPhone 6, which I think was, I don't remember how big it was, 5-6 millimeters. Those are much 6.9 millimeters with the iPhone 6. The current 16 Pros are about 8.25 millimeters. So we're talking, millimeters obviously may seem very small, but percentage-wise, you're talking a pretty big percent change from the sort of current level of thickness among these phones. Now, if that's enough to draw people in, that's unclear, right? Like, is it going to be, are people going to be willing to take the trade-off? But like a lot of time, physical changes in the cases are something that drive adoption because people want something that looks new.
Yes.
So that's an advantage for Apple here. Yeah, they want something that looks different. They want something that looks new. And if it really has a compelling look to it that, looks very different from what they're offering in sort of the standard models, different colors or different finishes or something like that, it might be something that really peps up the iPhone line sales because it will convince people to upgrade.
That makes sense as far as that goes. I mean, there's so much conversation around like whether there's a true shelf life for like foldable devices and what Apple would do there. Yeah. And it's interesting to see where the company is, reportedly going in spite of, in some cases, what the market might suggest, but also I think for Apple itself, what Apple's own market seems to desire. And I think there's always kind of a balancing act there and a bit of of a game, which I think is where it's helpful that Apple has kind of broken out this other phone that comes later kind of situation.
It's the other phone.
Yeah. And also we've got this.
I don't know.
Kind of play a bit.
I do sit there thinking maybe 4 phones is just too many. Like, I don't know.
It does feel like a lot.
I understand the idea of trying to cover all your angles, right? And try to make something for everybody. But there is a point at which maybe you've made too many phones.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. We need to take a quick break before we come back with my story of the week. I want to tell you about Acronis, who are bringing you this episode of Tech News Weekly. Acronis and the Acronis Threat Research Unit. You deserve fewer headaches in your life. Tell me about it. Even something as simple as watching TV can become a headache when your favorite shows are scattered across different streaming services. It's nearly impossible to find one place that has everything you need. Well, Acronis takes the headache out of cybersecurity with a natively integrated platform that offers comprehensive cyber protection in a single console. And if you want to know what's happening in cybersecurity, the Acronis Threat Research Unit, or TRU, is the place to go. It's your one-stop source for cybersecurity research. TRU also helps MSPs stop threats before they can damage you or your client's organization. Acronis Threat Research Unit is a dedicated unit composed of experienced cybersecurity experts. The team includes cross-functional experts in cybersecurity, AI, and threat intelligence. TRU conducts deep intelligence-driven research into emerging cyber threats, proactively manages cyber risks and responds to incidents, and provides security best practices to assist IT teams in building robust security frameworks. They also offer threat intelligence reports, custom security recommendations, and educational workshops. Whether you're an MSP looking to protect clients or you need to safeguard data in your own organization, Acronis has what you need. It's all there in Acronis Cyber Protect Cloud. EDR, XDR, remote monitoring and management, managed detection and response, email security, Microsoft 365 security, and even security awareness training. And it's all available in a single platform with a single point of control for everything, so it's easy to deploy and manage. If managing cybersecurity gives you a headache, it's time to check out Acronis. Know what's going on in the cybersecurity world by visiting go.acronis.com/twit and take the headache out of cybersecurity. That's go.acronis.com/twit. And of course, we thank Acronis for sponsoring this week's episode of Tech News Weekly. All right, back from the break, and yes, if you didn't know, Samsung just holding its Galaxy Unpacked event, and Samsung introduced a full refresh of, we just talked about it, foldable phones and smartwatches. To be clear, smartwatches not foldable, just the phones are foldable, with slimmer designs, brighter displays, and a deeper infusion of Gemini AI. Leading the charge, the Galaxy Z Fold7, the Z Flip7, joined by a budget-friendly Flip7 FE and 2 new Galaxy Watches. But the biggest trend from this event wasn't hardware. It was how AI is being used to reshape the way these devices feel, respond, and even look. Starting with a Galaxy Z Fold7. It's thinner, it's lighter, and no, it doesn't have an S Pen. It's Samsung's thinnest and lightest foldable to date at 8.9 millimeters folded, weighs just 215 grams. It did drop the S Pen support in order to slim down the design. So in order to make the screen thinner, removing that digitizer, that makes for the thinner build. It uses a titanium frame with the new flex hinge for better durability and a less visible crease. And the display size has actually been bumped up to 8 inches. Internal upgrades include a Snapdragon 8 Elite chip and a much bigger battery. The camera system is led by this is always so wild to me, 200 megapixel main sensor and updated selfie cams. They're no longer under the display. And it starts at about $2,000. It comes with Android 16 out of the box and is shipping soon. In the CNET piece, they said part of the reason the new foldable is so slim is that the company was free to remove that digitizer that was needed to process stylus inputs. Now, I had hoped to have someone on the show to talk about Samsung Galaxy Unpacked. When I reached out to people and everybody was there at the event, or I had one person who was stuck at airports with storms after the event. So it was rough to do that. So that's why I'm giving you a nice little summary here. There was also the Galaxy Z Flip7, which is bigger inside and brighter outside. The flex window now stretches edge to edge. You've got thinner bezels, and the brightness gets up to 2600 nits. The internal screen is 6.9 inches and has better water resistance as well. With a 50 megapixel main camera, 10-bit HDR processing, built-in Galaxy AI features, including something called the Now Bar and the Now Brief, which can give you kind of up to the moment information about your calendar and all that kind of stuff. And it starts at $1,100. And then there's the Z Flip7 FE, which is a foldable for the rest of us. A budget take on the Flip 6. It's got trimmed down specs. It's got Galaxy AI, don't you worry, or Gemini in this case, and comes with the Exynos 2400 chip. Smaller battery, fewer display flourishes, and you can only get it in white or black, but it's $900, so that makes it incredibly affordable in comparison. And then I want to mention real quick the Galaxy Watch8 and Watch8 Classic. Thinner design, squircle shape, brighter AMOLED display with 3000 nits of brightness, bigger batteries, and it has this feature that's kind of interesting. It's called an antioxidant measurer. Uses the watch sensor pressed against your thumb to kind of give you insights, allegedly, into what you might need for antioxidants. So, getting rid of those free radicals. And the Watch 8 Classic brings back the rotating bezel, available in 46 millimeters only. So let's talk a little bit about these devices. One thing that I've found interesting in the watch lineup in particular is how companies are, because we've kind of laid the foundation, right? You've got a watch that gives you notifications and then also tracks your basic health metrics. So how do you make things that are new and stand out? It seems like features like the antioxidant measurement are perhaps something to make it stand out. The usefulness of that, I don't know, but yeah. I mean, what do you think? Do you wish that the Apple Watch had a rotating face on it and an antioxidant measurer?
I'm still stuck on the antioxidant measures. Like, I got too many oxidants. That's always my problem. We got to get some antioxidants in there. Yeah, I don't know. There's always a question, especially as they add more of these sensors, like how useful are they, right? I mean, we have seen stuff like blood oxygen, for example, is a good, was it useful? It has its applications. There were some questions about reliability, right? And whenever you have questions about reliability related to health and wellness features, you really start to ask some deeper questions about whether or not those things are useful if they're not reliable. And I think you've seen a bit of a topping out when it comes to people wanting to do things that are potentially more helpful from a health perspective, but are a lot harder, like glucose or blood pressure. Like those are hard problems to solve when you're dealing with a watch. And in the meantime, if we can find a way to, measure antioxidants by putting your thumb against it, how many people are going to take their watch off every day to check the antioxidants by putting the thumb against it, right?
Yeah, and what am I really
I don't find that
getting
particularly
from it?
plausible. That's my feeling. As far as some of the other stuff goes, I don't know, a rotating. I remember when actual watches had like the rotating.
I love a little fidget on my
front.
wrist.
Yeah, it's good. That's a great fidget like spinner thing, but I just don't. I'm not sure how useful that is with a digital watch. Like in the analog watches, it used to mean something because you could kind of do time zones tracking by like, okay, I'm going to set the offset sort of here, but I'm not sure on a digital watch what that is for. So I think the arms race for smartwatches has gotten a lot harder just because it does feel like there are fewer things to add from sort of a hardware features perspective. It's amazing all the stuff that's already been crammed in there, considering, we're talking about something the size of a watch, obviously, and they have these incredibly complex, systems on chips inside of them and all this functionality that's packed in there. But at a certain point, I feel like we've hit a diminishing returns thing where every year it doesn't feel like, hey, we gotta announce a new feature. We gotta have a new thing on our watch. And the answer is, let's cram this sensor in there and maybe people want it.
Yeah, that's what it's feeling like, and it's trying to find sensor options that aren't going to get you sued and have to have the feature
patents,
removed.
Yeah.
No, I've never heard anyone who has a patent on antioxidant detection. So, good work there. I do think that I've heard from the everyday people who are maybe not as techie, who seem really enamored of the idea of a not with the watch but with the foldable mindset, and kind of going back in some ways to that flip and fold and all that jazz. I remain skeptical in the sense of if there's this potential for the display to end up having a crease in it and it doesn't last as long as one would hope. That doesn't seem worth it. And I'm also sort of, I'm put off by the idea that when I fold it in half, it's 2 times as thick as it was when I already, it doesn't solve the problem.
I am laughing a little bit also at these pictures of the Z Flip7 and the Flip FE, because those little displays on the outside with the little like widgets on them could not look more Apple-like. I'm sorry.
They are very, very Apple-like.
Incredibly Apple-like. It's fine. Whatever. I think you're right. I don't know. It seems to me that the ones that fold like old school style, right? Like our old flip phones used to be, where they fold open, like top to bottom. I don't see the utility in that one. That one strikes me as kind of strange because you have this little like widgety screen on the outside, and then you flip it open and it's like a normal phone on the inside. But as you pointed out, it's twice as large and thick. It's like a big, thick wallet you're carrying around with you. The ones that fold sort of side, like book-like, I think are more interesting, if only because the idea that sometimes you might want something that has a larger screen. Like, oh, you know what? I'm watching video. I'm on the plane. Like, isn't it cool that I can flip this open and watch on a larger screen? But I think one of the things that's held that back on the Android side has been the Android tablet interface. Like, a lot of apps are not designed, because Android doesn't have a huge tablet market. Like, a lot of the apps are not designed for tablet sizes. So I think that's held that back a little bit. The hardware might be there, but the software isn't ready to quite support it. And to your point, depending on how visible that crease is, it may or may not impact the utility of that larger screen. And again, how thin can you get it? This is one of the rumors about that iPhone 17 Air we discussed earlier in the show, is that by making your base phone thinner, if you slap 2 of them together to get a foldable, it might be more palatable when you fold it together. So it's interesting, and they keep pushing it forward. But I think right now it's still perhaps more of a solution in search of a problem.
Absolutely. Well, there was one other announcement that Samsung made that kind of stuck out, which is that Samsung Wallet has added buy now, pay later support. We've seen that kind of hit the swath of the wallet era or wallet section in terms of Apple adding buy now, pay later options. And now Samsung joins the fold, as it were.
I see what you did there.
Haha. Dan, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to join me today on the show. If people would like to keep up with what you're doing, where's a good place for them to go to do that?
Well, if you'd like to read what I'm writing about tech, you can go over to sixcolors.com, where I cover all things Apple with my pal Jason Snell. I'm also on a bunch of podcasts, including Clockwise every week with Mikah over on relay.fm, and The Rebound, which you can find at reboundcast.com. I'm also a science fiction author. If you want to find my books, as well as everything else I do, you can go to dmoren.com.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dan. See you soon.
Thanks, Mikah. Bye.
Bye-bye. All right. We've got an interview coming up, but I want to take a quick break here to tell you about US Cloud, bringing you this episode of Tech News Weekly. US Cloud is the #1 Microsoft Unified Support replacement. Now, we have been talking for a few months now about US Cloud, the global leader in third-party Microsoft support for enterprises, now supporting 50 of the Fortune 500. Switching to US Cloud can save your business 30 to 50% over Microsoft Unified and Premier support. And it's faster, 2 times faster average time to resolution versus Microsoft. But now US Cloud is excited to tell you about a new offering. It's Azure Cost Optimization Services. So be honest. When was the last time you evaluated your Azure usage? If it's been a while, you probably have some Azure sprawl, a little spend creep going on. But the good news is saving on Azure is easier than you think with US Cloud. US Cloud offers an 8-week Azure engagement powered by VBox that identifies key opportunities to reduce costs across your entire Azure environment. With expert guidance, you're going to get access to US Cloud's senior engineers with an average of more than 16 years with Microsoft products. At the end of those 8 weeks, your interactive dashboard will identify, rebuild, downscale opportunities, and unused resources, allowing you to reallocate your precious IT dollars towards actually needed resources. Or invest your Azure savings in US Cloud's Microsoft support, like a few of US Cloud's other customers, and completely eliminate your unified spend. Sam, the technical operations manager at Bead Gaming, gives US Cloud 5 stars, saying, quote, "We found some things that had been running for 3 years, which no one was checking. These VMs were, 10 grand a month. Not a massive chunk in the grand scheme of how much we spend on Azure, but once we got to 40K or 50K a month, it really started to add up. It's simple. Stop overpaying for Azure. Identify and eliminate Azure creep and boost your performance all in 8 weeks with US Cloud. Visit uscloud.com and book a call today to find out how much your team can save. That's uscloud.com to book a call today and get faster Microsoft support for less. Thank you, US Cloud, for sponsoring this week's episode of Tech News Weekly. All right, we are back from the break, and I am joined by Joe Supan of CNET, who joins us to talk about, I think, honestly, when I reached out, I find it to be a rather harrowing tale. And so thank you for being here on the show today.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So let's kick things off. You, in your piece, kind of open with an example of a chatbot impersonating in a way, the story of a deceased loved one using information scraped from an obituary. Could you tell our listeners a little bit about what happened here?
Yeah. So last year, my sister passed away, and she passed away early in the morning. And later that day, like that afternoon, my mom got a text from our aunt saying that she saw this obituary page appear that was kind of weird, seemed to have a lot of false information in it. So as soon as we got that text, we looked at it, and then I Googled my sister's name just to see if there was any other things out there. And like right away, even just, hours after she'd passed away, there were already 4 or 5 like obituaries that we had no knowledge of, that were like right at the top of Google's search results. So they had really, I don't know, this process had happened just like really quickly before we could even kind of wrap our heads around it.
Yeah. So to be clear, this happened, and no one in the family had written an obituary and passed it off to anyone, and it just simply like appeared out of nowhere.
Yeah, no, we had nothing to do with it. I mean, we were just reeling. It was the same day. And yeah, writing this article, I learned that is just how this works. Like when these AI botnets will detect like a flood of words like passed away or something like that, and the pages will just be created generally automatically. I mean, sometimes they have some human like interference, but they really just kind of kick into gear. And if there's enough people talking about it, there'll be more pages that are created.
Wow. So of course we know that many obituaries, when time is taken, are written with love and care, often by grieving family members. I kind of wanted to talk to you about your and perhaps your family's reaction to arguably the ethical issues that arise when AI models harvest this kind of deeply personal content. And as you talked about, get it wrong in so many ways. And I mean, something that really stuck with me in reading your piece was kind of like, this term gets used a lot, but there was almost a sense of like this gaslighting aspect of you even maybe going, well, I guess that sort of makes sense, but that's really not how she, and like, it just seemed like a lot to process all at once.
Yeah, totally. And gaslighting is a good word for it. I hadn't thought about it like that, but that is what it feels like, because it is, I'm sure a lot of people who have seen these obituaries probably feel this, but it's like there are such personal details embedded in them because they are taken from these really sincere posts on social media. So like it will get some things like eerily correct, but then other things will just be like so off base and offensively off base in a lot of ways. Like in my sister's obituary, they were saying like she died of autism and like she had all these health issues. And a lot of times when I was like looking at these things, they would really allude to kind of like a tragic cause of death or something. So I can imagine for many families, it's like, wait, that's not what happened. I think people feel a lot of like anger and hurt in those moments.
Absolutely. And that anger and hurt, I think, is one of the main aspects of why I wanted to talk to you about this, because I was curious in doing, in going through this and experiencing this, but then taking it and channeling it into a piece where you kind of share, hey, you're not alone if this has happened to you, but also be on the lookout for this. There's a challenge that pops up in the first place, that if the family or whomever actually does write an obituary, these are often published and posted online with good reason, so that people can learn about what happened and can, share condolences. And the second that that's posted publicly, then it's out there, and then the AI bots come in. And I mean, do we know, were you able to find anything that people can do to protect this information from being scraped? Because it sounds like even if, as you mentioned, even if you didn't post something, you didn't share an obituary online yet, somehow these bots are still gaining access to this information and posting it online. Yeah,
I think it's like by the time you've written the obituary, it's like too late. Once the legitimate obituary is out there, it's like that will appear on Google's results first. But that usually happens 2-3 days after someone passes away. So it's really that gap, like those first few days, that's where these bots are capitalizing. They're just scraping social media comments, basically. Like they're not formal obituaries. As far as what people can do to protect themselves from that. I don't know that there is anything they can do to stop their posts from being scraped. I would just say, like, the more you can report it when you see it to, like, Google, Facebook, wherever it's appearing, I think that will, like, lessen the reach of these kind of pages.
Understood. Now, you talk a little bit about some of the, because people might be wondering why, what is gained by posting these sites and these different, obituaries. Can you talk about the motivation behind it, and a little bit, I think, about copyright rules as it pertains to this, which I found kind of surprising, I guess. Yeah.
The why, I think, it's really just it's ad sales. It's just if getting one click will add up to like a penny or two, and if you do it at volume, you will make some money. And I don't think it's very much. I think this is often happening in countries. One guy I talked to who runs a bunch of these pages was in Nigeria, and he said he makes about $100 a week on this. So it's not like crazy lucrative. They don't need to get a ton of views on these pages to make it worth it. It's just like there's such a low bar for entry to create them that they can just do it at a huge scale.
Wow.
And in terms of the like copyright laws, it's complicated, but basically what a lawyer I talked to told me is that a deceased person has a lot fewer rights than a living person when it comes to things like defamation or copyright. So it's would be very hard to pursue like legal action against any of these websites.
You did mention, I think you talked a little bit about it, Google and Facebook making some changes to mitigate the issue. Maybe you could talk about that process, but also, are there any have you heard from any of the companies that are doing this, or I guess the smaller sites that are doing this, about steps they're taking to prevent the inaccurate information from being published? Or is it really just a matter of kind of a Wild West situation?
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. It is a Wild West situation. Like these websites that are publishing these things are so small, and like they come and go so much. Like even when I was tracking this over just a few weeks, and it was like one that I would see every day that would be posting all the time, all of a sudden it wouldn't be there. And I mean, I think I counted about 25 of them just when I was looking at this, but I got the feeling that, it is probably much larger than that. So I don't think these sites really have any kind of like responsibility to standards or inaccurate information. I think the responsibility really lies with the platforms that people are finding them on, namely Google and Facebook. And both of those companies told me that, like, yeah, they're getting better at detecting this stuff. Like, I sent them these examples, and they were like, we've taken those down. But as far as I could tell, like, I continued to check after they told me that. And it was like, yep, this process happens every single day. And it's still showing up on those platforms.
Wow. I want to kind of pull it back because there's a lot of conversation right now with AI in particular and its scraping of the internet. Do you feel this is exemplary of the criticism surrounding AI bots scraping the web, and perhaps when it comes in particularly to these emotionally sensitive areas of the web, and how it's being used in this way?
Yeah, I think it's it's a small corner of this phenomenon, and I think most people I've talked to about this story had no idea that this was happening. But I think it's like an evocative example of how like something really personal can be taken from you and used for harm, even though it might not be intentional. I mean, they're ultimately just trying to make money, but yeah, it just shows us, I don't know, what can happen when so much of our lives are online and when there are no guardrails about how that information can be used.
Absolutely. Joe, I want to thank you so much for taking the time, to write this piece, to do this research, but also for joining us. If people would like to kind of keep up with the work that you're doing, are there places they should go to stay up to date?
Yeah, just cnet.com. Yeah, you can check. I generally write about internet, so you can check out all my work on there.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Bye.
All right. Have a good day. All righty, folks, we are going to move along now to my next story that I want to tell you about. And this is really interesting because we have just heard about Perplexity working on a browser offering. And apparently, there's another company working on a browser offering. The AI search wars are moving from the results page to your desktop. Perplexity has launched an AI-first browser called Comet, which integrates its assistant across every part of the browsing experience. Meanwhile, OpenAI is reportedly working on a Chromium-based browser of its own, a move that would put it in direct competition with Google Chrome, Microsoft Edge, and to some extent, Apple's Safari. Both companies are betting on a future where your browser doesn't just display websites, it reads, interprets, summarizes, and acts on them for you. So let's start by talking about Perplexity's Comet, because it's actually announced and real. It's the AI browser that wants to do it all. Comet replaces the traditional address bar with an AI chat box that is powered by Perplexity's assistant. So with that, you're able to search the web. You can summarize articles or other content. You can draft emails using it. You can manage your calendar, and you can navigate sites automatically. According to Perplexity's CEO, it's to create a browser that functions more like an operating system than a passive viewer. The CEO said, "This is our bet on building an OS." Now, this I find interesting in and of itself because we have seen, to a certain extent, companies attempt to integrate better with the operating systems that we have. So, of course, on Microsoft's side, you have Windows. On Apple's side, you have macOS. And we've seen, ChatGPT app. We've seen some of these others create apps to try to integrate, but it's come down to those platforms being, I think, a little more locked down. In the case of Microsoft, with it having its own AI system, with Copilot so deeply integrated, it's hard to compete in that space and to get into that space. But I think for many of us, we do spend a lot of our time in the browser, and that is a more open area for these companies to hop in and sort of latch on with their tech. So where you have that block of getting to the base system level, if people are mostly using their browsers and you can just give them a browser that they can use, it is in some ways equivalent to building an operating system. And I think in that way, it's a very clever means of gaining access to more of the user's information and data for the sake of being able to give these features. Users are prompted to connect their Google accounts, which will allow the assistant to read Gmail and Google Calendar. And in doing so, it can act on those and provide, changes to your calendar or give you summaries of your upcoming day. Now, according to Reuters, Crystal Hu, Anna Tong, and Kenrick Kai, OpenAI is reportedly working on a browser designed to showcase and deploy AI agents like its operator. These agents could perform tasks on behalf of users, so booking travel, filling forms, summarizing articles directly within the browser. And like Comet, the browser will reportedly be built atop Chromium and expected to integrate tightly with ChatGPT and OpenAI's ecosystem. The browser will leverage OpenAI's agent-like AI model and perform those features on behalf of the user. Now, according to this piece, OpenAI has reportedly hired several engineers who originally helped build Google Chrome. So you can imagine that in this way, it is a much better created and better integrated system. We've seen a few other companies out there try to create browsers that just can't compete against Chrome in particular. But to a lesser extent, some of the other browser offerings like Safari and Microsoft's own Edge. Both companies seem to be trying to displace Google as the default way people access information. Many of us, not myself, I use Safari, but many of us use Google Chrome as their web browser of choice. And what's interesting is the way that these browsers are going to kind of work on search. Instead of indexing and ranking pages, these browsers aim to interpret and act on content directly, positioning the AI as the interface and not just the tool. By controlling the browser, OpenAI and Perplexity could collect, and this is the big thing, richer behavioral data and more tightly integrate AI into everyday tasks. So there's the concern, right? That in creating these browsers and getting more behavioral data, if that's used for training, that's a little bit more information than perhaps we've given these companies in the past as they have worked on bringing AI to us and AI tools to us. It wants to challenge Google's dominance, but also, I think, take a little bit of a playbook out, or a page out of Google's playbook, which is to provide access to information so that you can learn what people are interested in and how they go about doing it. Comet's deep access to user data, having access to Gmail, to Google Calendar APIs, that may set a precedent for how these other AI browsers will work. It makes sense. We've seen, to a certain extent, Amazon do this with its digital assistant, not as AI as it could be, but still having access to our calendars for the sake of being able to tell us about what is going on. And of course, OpenAI hasn't yet revealed, given that this browser is still just rumored to be coming out, its data collection practices for the browser. But that, of course, has already come up with Comet. AI-first browsers are kind of a fundamental shift where you don't just have the tab that has the AI system in it and you access it that way, but instead working as the viewport into the vast internet, right? And we know that Google is increasingly under pressure, not just from competing search tools, but from rivals who at this point are saying, don't use Google search. We can help you find things better. We've got a better means of searching the web and providing you information. Not to mention, Google also is under the spotlight of many regulator, and in that way, needing to allow for competition in the space is something that Google is having to bear in mind. So whether users are going to hand over more control to AI assistants, especially ones that are fully embedded into the browser, that seems to be the next place we'll be looking as these new browsers hit and people give them a go and see if there's an improvement when the AI agent is more deeply integrated into what you're doing. It's something that I've wanted from Apple in particular for a while, something that I think has been, for the most part, a success on Microsoft's front when you have that deeper integration and you're not having to do the heavy lifting of bringing the context with you to an AI chatbot and saying, okay, here's exactly what I'm dealing with. Here's what it looks like. Here's what I want to do. That gets complicated. If it can see what you're doing and let you interact by simply asking a question instead of having to provide all that context, it's already a much more powerful system. So it's perhaps a win-win with the understanding that more data may be shared with these companies than we've given them in the past. So Comet available, OpenAI's browser perhaps coming soon. That is going to bring us to the end of this episode of Tech News Weekly. The show publishes every Thursday at twit.tv/TNW. That is where you can go to subscribe to the show in audio and video formats. If you'd like to get all of our shows ad-free, just the content, well, we've got a way for you to do that. It's called Club Twit at twit.tv/clubtwit. When you join the club, we'd love to have you as part of the club. We've got monthly and yearly plans, and when you join, you gain access to all of our shows, all of our content ad-free. You gain access to our Twit Plus feeds. There's the Twit Plus news events feed, so that's going to have our coverage of different tech news events that take place, like WWDC, for example. Bits and clips, so behind the scenes, before the show, after the show, stuff will be there. And the third feed, which is a feed of our Club Twitch shows, like Mikah's Crafting Corner, that's me, and some of our other great shows, book clubs, etc., that are available in the club. With that, you also get a little key that you can unlock our Discord. It's a fun place to go to chat with your fellow Club Twit members and those of us here at Twit. And we would love to see you there. Every time someone new joins, they are sort of shown on the welcome page. And I love going in there and going, oh my goodness, look, oh, ooh. So more and more of you are joining. We love that. Thank you for being a member of Club Twit. And twit.tv/clubtwit if you're not yet one. If you would like to follow me online, I'm at Mikah Sargent on many a social media network, where you can head to chihuahua.coffee. That's CHIHUA.coffee, where I've got links to the places I'm most active online. Be sure to check out my other shows, which some of them will publish today. iOS Today and Hands on Apple published today. And every Sunday, you can check out Hands on Tech as well. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll catch you again next week for another episode of Tech News Weekly. Bye-bye.
From Silicon Valley boardrooms to tomorrow's AI breakthroughs, if you need to keep up to date with tech, you need Twit.tv. At Twit, we're tech experts who understand what's happening and can keep you in the loop. And we do it in a thoughtful, informed, and fun way. Start your Sundays with This Week in Tech, a roundtable of tech journalists and people in the know with a rundown of the week's most important tech news. But that's not all. All week long, you can stay ahead of security threats with Steve Gibson and Security Now. Keep up on all things Apple with Mac Break Weekly. Listen to the most informed Microsoft experts in the world with Paul Thurrott and Richard Campbell on Windows Weekly. Our flagship shows feature tech's most respected voices, giving you the insight you need to understand and benefit from the changing world of technology. We give you analysis you won't find anywhere else, so you can make smarter business decisions and take advantage of the technologies transforming your world. Whether you're a CEO, IT professional, or simply passionate about technology, Twit's network of shows gives you the edge you need in today's digital landscape. Don't miss a minute. Subscribe to twit.tv today.